was hearing the narrations of the pastimes of Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram from Sukadeva Goswami. These pastimes are all transcendently pleasurable to hear, and Maharaj Pariksit addressed Sukadeva Goswami as follows: My dear Lord, The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the bestower of both liberation and love of God simultaneously. Anyone who becomes a devotee of the Lord automatically attains liberation without having to make a separate attempt. Because the Lord is unlimited, his pastimes and his activities for creating, maintaining, and destroying the whole cosmic manifestation are also unlimited. I therefore wish to hear about other pastimes of his, which you may not have described as yet. My dear Master, the conditioned souls within this material world are frustrated by searching out the pleasure of happiness derived from sense gratification. Such desires for material enjoyment are always piercing the hearts of the conditioned souls. But I am actually experiencing how the transcendental topics of Lord Krishna's pastimes can relieve one from being affected by such material activities of sense gratification. I think that no intelligent person can reject this method of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord again and again. Simply by hearing, one can remain always steeped in transcendental pleasure. Thus one will not be attracted by material sense gratification. In this statement, Maharaj Pariksit has used two important words, Vishana and Vishesha Jnana. Vishana means morose. Materialistic people invent many ways and means to become fully satisfied, but actually they remain morose. The point may be raised that sometimes transcendentalists also remain morose. Pariksit Maharaj, however, has used the word Vishesha Jnana. There are two kinds of transcendentalists, namely the impersonalists and the personalists. Vishesha Jnana refers to the personalists who are interested in transcendental variegatedness. The devotees become jubilant by hearing the descriptions of the personal activities of the Supreme Lord, whereas the impersonalists, who are actually more attracted by the impersonal feature of the Lord, are only superficially attracted by the Lord's personal activities. As such, in spite of coming in contact with the pastimes of the Lord, the impersonalists do not fully realize the benefit to be derived. Thus, they become just as morose as the materialists do in pursuing their fruitive activities. King Pariksit continued, the ability to talk can be perfected only by describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord. The ability to work with one's hands can be successful only when one engages himself in the service of the Lord with those hands. Similarly, one's mind can be peaceful only when one simply thinks of Krishna, the absolute truth. This does not mean that one has to be a very great thinker. One only has to understand simply that Krishna, the absolute truth, is the all-pervasive. By his localized aspect of Paramatma, if one can simply think that Krishna as Paramatma is everywhere, even within the atom, then one's thinking is perfect. He can perfect the thinking, feeling, and willing functions of his mind. The perfect devotee does not see the material world as it appears to material eyes. He sees everywhere the presence of his worshipable Lord and his Paramatma feature. Maharaj Pariksit continued by saying that the function of the ear can be perfected simply by engagement in hearing of the transcendental activities of the Lord, and the function of the head can be fully utilized when it is engaged in bowing down before the Lord and his representative. The Lord is represented in everyone's heart. This is a fact, and therefore the highly advanced devotee offers his respects to every living entity, considering that the body is the temple of the Lord. But it is not possible for our men to come to that stage of life immediately, because that stage is for the first-class devotee. The second-class devotee can consider the Vaishnavas, or the devotees of the Lord, to be representatives of Krishna. And the devotee who is just beginning, the neophyte or third-class devotee, can bow his head before the deity in the temple, before the spiritual master, who is the direct manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, in the neophyte stage, in the intermediate stage, or in the fully advanced perfected stage, one can make the function of the head perfect by bowing down before the Lord, or his representative. Similarly, one can perfect the function of the eyes by seeing the Lord and his representative. In this way, everyone can elevate the functions of the different parts of his body to the highest perfectional stage simply by engaging them in the service of the Lord or his representative. If one is able to do nothing more, he can simply bow down before the Lord and his representative and drink the chartamrita, the water which is washed the lotus feet of the Lord and his devotee. When hearing these statements of Maharaj Pariksit, Sukadeva Goswami was overwhelmed with devotional ecstasy because of King Parikshit's advanced understanding of the Vaishnava philosophy. Sukadeva Goswami was already engaged in describing the activities of the Lord, and when asked by Maharaj Pariksit to describe them further, he continued to narrate Srimad Bhagavatam with great pleasure. There was a very nice Brahmana friend of Lord Krishna. As a perfect Brahmana, he was very elevated in transcendental knowledge, and because of his advanced knowledge, he was not at all attached to material enjoyment. Therefore, he was very peaceful, and he had achieved supreme control over his senses. This means that the Brahmana is a perfect devotee, because unless one is a perfect devotee, he cannot achieve the highest standard of knowledge. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that a person who has come to the perfection of knowledge surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, any person who has surrendered his life for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has come to the point of perfect knowledge. The senses of the devotee become purified, and in that stage the senses are engaged in the service of the Lord. That is the complete field of devotional service. Although the Brahmana friend of Lord Krishna was a householder, he was not busy accumulating wealth for a very comfortable living. Therefore, he was satisfied by the income which automatically came to him according to his destiny. This is a sign of perfect knowledge. A man in perfect knowledge knows that one cannot be happier than he is destined to be. In this material world, everyone is destined to suffer a certain amount of distress and enjoy a certain amount of happiness. The amount of happiness and distress is already predestined for every living entity. No one can increase or decrease the happiness of the materialistic way of life. The Brahmana, therefore, did not exert himself for more material happiness. Instead, he used his time for advancement of Krishna consciousness. Externally, he appeared very poor because he had no rich clothes and could not provide rich clothes for his wife. Because their material condition was not very opulent, they were not even eating sufficiently, and thus both he and his wife appeared very thin. The wife was not anxious for her personal comfort, but she was concerned for her husband, who was such a pious Brahmana. She trembled due to her weak health, and although she did not like to dictate her husband, she spoke as follows: "My dear Lord, I know that Lord Krishna, the husband of the goddess of fortune, is your personal friend. You are also a devotee of Lord Krishna, and he is always ready to help his devotee. Even if you think that you are not rendering any devotional service to the Lord, still you are surrendered to him, and the Lord is the protector of the surrendered soul. Moreover, I know that Lord Krishna is the ideal personality of Vedic culture. He is always in favor of Brahminical culture, and he is very kind to the qualified Brahmanas. You are the most fortunate person, because you have as your friend the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna is the only shelter for personalities like you, because you are fully surrendered unto him. I am sure that he will immediately understand your impoverished condition. You are a householder, therefore without money you are in distress. But as soon as he understands your position, he will certainly give you abundant riches, so that you can live very comfortably. Lord Krishna is now the king of Bhoja, Vrishni, and Andhra dynasties, and I have heard that he never leaves his capital city, Dwarka. He is living there without outside engagements. He is so kind and liberal that he immediately gives everything, even his personal self, to any person who surrenders unto him. Since he is prepared to give himself personally to his devotee, there is nothing wonderful in giving some material riches. Of course, he does not give material wealth to his devotee if the devotee is not very much fixed. But I think that in your case, he knows perfectly well how much you are fixed in his devotional service. Therefore he will not hesitate to award you some material benefit for the bare necessities of life. In this way the wife of the Brahmana again and again requested in great humility and submission that he go to Lord Krishna. The Brahmana thought that there was no need to ask for material benefit from Lord Shri Krishna, but he was induced by the repeated requests of his wife. Moreover, he thought, if I go there, I shall be able to see the Lord personally. That will be a great opportunity, even if I don't ask for material benefits from him. When he had decided to go to Krishna, he asked his wife if she had anything in the home that he could offer to Krishna, because he must take some presentation for his friend. The wife immediately collected 4 palmfuls of chipped rice from her neighborhood friends and tied it in a small cloth-like handkerchief and gave it to her husband to present to Krishna. Without waiting any longer, the Brahmana took the presentation and proceeded toward Dwarka to see his Lord. He was absorbed in the thought of how he would be able to see Lord Krishna. He had no thought within his heart other than Lord Krishna. It was, of course, very difficult to reach the palaces of the kings of the outer dynasty, but Brahmanas were allowed to visit. When the Brahmana friend of Lord Krishna went there, he, along with other Brahmanas, had to pass through 3 military encampments. And in each camp, there were very big gates, and he also had to pass through them. After the gates of the camps, there were 16,000 big palaces, the residential quarters of the 16,000 queens of Lord Krishna. The Brahmana entered one palace, which was very gorgeously decorated. When he entered this beautiful palace, he felt that he was swimming in the ocean of transcendental pleasure, and he felt himself constantly diving and surfacing in that transcendental ocean. At that time, Lord Krishna was sitting on the bedstead of Queen Rukmini. Even from a considerable distance, he could see that the Brahmana was coming to his home. He could recognize him as his friend. Lord Krishna immediately left his seat and came forward to receive the Brahmana friend, and upon reaching him, embraced the Brahmana, and with his 2 arms. Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all transcendental pleasure, yet he himself felt great pleasure upon embracing the poor Brahmana, because he was meeting his very dear friend. Lord Krishna has him seated on his own bedstead, and personally brought him all kinds of fruits and drinks to offer him, as it is proper in receiving a worshipful guest. Lord Shri Krishna is the supreme pure, and because he was playing the role of an ordinary human being, he immediately washed the Brahmana's feet for his own purification, sprinkled the water onto his head, and after this the Lord smeared the body of the Brahmana with different kinds of scented pulp, such as sandalwood, aguru, and saffron. He immediately burned several kinds of scented incense, and, as is usual, offered him arati with burning lamps. And thus, offering him an adequate welcome, after the Brahmana had taken food and drink, Lord Krishna said, "My dear friend, it is a great fortune that you have come here." The Brahmana, being very poor, was not dressed nicely. His clothing was torn and dirty, and his body was very lean and thin. He appeared not very clean. The goddess of fortune, Rukmini Devi, personally began to fan him with the Chandra fan, and the other women in the palace were astonished at Lord Krishna's behavior in receiving the Brahmana in that way. They were surprised to see how eager Lord Krishna was to welcome this particular Brahmana. They wondered how Lord Krishna could personally receive a Brahmana who was poor, not very neat or clean, and poorly dressed. But at the same time, they could realize that the Brahmana was not an ordinary living being. They knew that he must have performed great pious activities. Otherwise, why was Lord Krishna, the husband of the goddess of fortune, taking care of him so much? They were still more surprised to see that the Brahmana was seated on the bedstead of Lord Krishna. They were especially surprised to see that Lord Krishna had embraced him, exactly as he embraced his older brother, Balaramaji. Because Lord Krishna used to embrace only Rukmini or Balaram and no one else. After the Brahmana had been nicely received and seated on Lord Krishna's own cushioned bed, he and Krishna took each other's hands and began to talk about their early life, when they both lived under the protection of the Gurukula. Lord Krishna said, "My dear Brahmana friend, you are the most intelligent personality, and you know very well the principles of religious life. I believe that after you finished your education at the house of our teacher, and after you sufficiently remunerated him, you must have gone back to your home and accepted a suitable wife. I know very well that from the beginning you were not at all attached to the materialistic way of life, nor did you desire to be very opulent materially. Therefore, you are in need of money. In this material world, persons who are not attached to material opulence are rarely found. Such unattached persons have the least desire to accumulate wealth and prosperity for sense gratification. But sometimes they are found to collect money just to exhibit the exemplary life of the household. They show how by proper distribution of wealth, one can become an ideal household, and at the same time a great devotee. Such ideal householders are to be considered followers of my footsteps. I hope, my dear brother and friend, that you remember all those days of our school life, when you or I were living together at boarding school. Actually, whatever knowledge you and I received in life was accumulated in our student life. If a man is sufficiently educated in student life, under the guidance of a proper teacher, the life becomes successful in the future. He can very easily cross over the ocean of nothingness, and he is not subject to the influence of the illusory energy. My dear friend, everyone should consider his father to be his first teacher. Because of the mercy of one father, one gets a father. The father is therefore the natural spiritual master. Our next spiritual master is he who initiates us into the transcendental knowledge. He is to be worshipped as much as I am. The spiritual master may be more than one. The spiritual master who instructs the disciple about spiritual matters is called the Shishka Guru, and the spiritual master who initiates the disciple is called the Diksha Guru. Both of them are my representatives. There may be many spiritual masters who instruct, but the initiator, spiritual master, is one. A human being who takes advantage of these spiritual masters and receiving proper knowledge from them crosses the ocean of material existence, is to be understood as having properly utilized his human form of life. He has practical knowledge that the ultimate interest of life, which is to be gained only in this human form, is to achieve spiritual perfection and thus be transferred back home back to Godhead. My dear friend, I am Paramatma, the super soul present within everyone's heart, and it is my direct order that human society follow the principles of Varna and Ashram. I have stated in the Bhagavad Gita, human society should be divided into 4 Varnas, according to quality and action. Similarly, everyone should divide his life into 4 parts. One should utilize the first part of his life for becoming a bona fide student, receiving adequate knowledge, and keeping oneself in the vow of brahmacharya, so that one may completely devote his life for the service of the spiritual master, without indulging in sense gratification. A brahmacharya is meant to lead a life of austerity and penance. The householder is meant to live a regulated life of sense gratification. No one should remain a householder for the 3rd stage of life. In that stage, one has to return to the austerities and penances performed formerly in brahmacharya life, and thus relieve himself from the attachments of the materialistic way of life, and one may accept the order of sannyasi. As the super soul of all living entities, I sit within everyone's heart and observe everyone's activities at every stage and order of life. Regardless of which stage one is in, when I see that one is engaged seriously and sincerely in discharging the duties ordered by the spiritual master, and is thus dedicating his life to the service of the spiritual master, that person becomes most dear to me. As far as the life of brahmacharya is concerned, if one can continue the life of brahmacharya under the direction of the spiritual master, that is extremely good. But if in brahmacharya life one feels sex impulses, he should leave the spiritual master, satisfying him according to the Guru's desire. According to the Vedic system, a gift is offered to the spiritual master, which is called Guru Dakshina. Then the disciple should take to householder life and accept a wife according to the religious rites. These instructions given by Lord Krishna, while talking with his friend, the learned Brahmana, are very good for the guidance of human society. The system of human civilization that does not promote Varna and Ashrama is nothing but a polished animal society. Indulgence in sex life by a man or a woman living single is never acceptable in human society. A man should strictly follow the principles of brahmachari life, or, with the permission of the spiritual master, should get married. Single life with illicit sex is animal life, for the animals have no such institution as marriage. Modern society does not aim at fulfilling the mission of human life, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. To fulfill this mission, the system of varna and ashrama must be followed. The system is followed indirectly. When the system is followed rigidly and consciously, it fulfills this mission. When it is followed indirectly without the guidance of superior authority, it simply creates a disturbing condition of human society, and there is no peace, and there is no prosperity. Krishna continued to talk with his Brahmana friend. My dear friend, I think you remember our activities during the days when we were living as students. You may remember that once we went to collect fuel from the forest by the order of the Guru's wife. While collecting the dry wood, we entered the dense forest, and by chance we became lost. There was an unexpected dust storm, and in the clouds and lightning in the sky, an explosive sound of thunder. The sunset came, and we were lost in the dark jungle. After this, there was severe rainfall, and the whole ground was overflooded with water, and we could not trace out the way to return to our Guru's ashrama. You may remember that heavy rainfall. It was not actually rainfall, but a sort of devastation. On account of the dust storm and the heavy rain, we began to feel greatly pain, and whichever direction we turned, we were bewildered. In that distressed condition, we took each other's hand to try to find our way out. We passed the whole night in that way, and early in the morning, when our absence became known to our Guru Dev, he sent his other disciples to search us out. He also came with them, and when they reached us in the jungle, they found us very much distressed. With great compassion, our Guru Dev said, "My dear boys, it is very wonderful that you have suffered so much trouble for me. Everyone likes to take care of his body as the first consideration, but you are so good and faithful to your Guru that without caring for your bodily comforts, you have taken so much trouble for me. I am glad to see that bona fide students like you will undergo any kind of trouble for the satisfaction of the spiritual master. That is the way for a bona fide disciple to become free from his debt to the spiritual master. It is the duty of the disciple to dedicate his life to the service of the spiritual master. My dear best of the twice born, I am greatly pleased by your acts, and I bless you. May all your desires and ambitions be fulfilled. May the understanding of the Vedas which you have learned from me always continue to remain in your memory, so that at every moment you can remember the teaching of the Vedas and quote their instructions without difficulty. Thus you will never be disappointed in this life or in the next life." Krishna continued, "My dear friend, you may remember that many such incidents occurred while we were in the ashram of our spiritual master. Both of us can realize that without the blessings of the spiritual master, no one can become happy. By the mercy of the spiritual master and by his blessings, one can achieve the peace and prosperity and be able to fulfill the human mission of life." On hearing this, the learned Brahmana replied, "My dear Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord and the Supreme Master of everyone. And since I was fortunate enough to live with you in the house of our Guru, I think I have nothing more to do in the matter of prescribed Vedic duties. My dear Lord, the Vedic hymns, ritualistic ceremonies, religious activities, and all other necessities for the perfection of human life, including economic development and sense gratification and liberation, are all derived from one source, your Supreme Personality. All the different processes of life are ultimately meant for understanding your personality. In other words, they are the different parts of your transcendental form. And yet you play the role of a student and live with us in the house of the Guru. This means that you adopted all these pastimes for your pleasure only. Otherwise, there was no need for your playing the role of a human being." Now, would you like to hear what happens next? The 81st chapter. Let's see how he gets blessed by Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the super soul of all living entities, knows everyone's heart very well. He is especially inclined to the Brahmana devotees. Lord Krishna is also called Brahmanya Deva, which means that he is worshipped by the Brahmanas. Therefore, it is understood that a devotee who is fully surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead has already acquired the position of Brahmana. Without becoming a Brahmana, one cannot approach the Supreme Bhavan, Lord Krishna. Krishna is especially concerned with the vanquishing of the distress of his devotees, and he is the only shelter of the pure devotees. Lord Krishna engaged for a long time in talking with Sudama Vipra about their past association. Then, just to enjoy the company of an old friend, Lord Krishna began to smile and asked, "My dear friend, what have you brought for me? Has your wife given you some nice edible for me?" While addressing his friend, Lord Krishna looked upon him and smiled with great love. He continued, "My dear friend, you must have brought some presentation for me from your home." Lord Krishna knew that Sudama was hesitating to present him with the paltry chipped rice, which was actually unfit for his eating. Understanding the mind of Sudama Vipra, the Lord said, "My dear friend, I am certainly not in need of anything, but if my devotee gives me something, it is an offering of love. Even though it may be very insignificant, I accept it with great pleasure. On the other hand, if a person is not a devotee, even though he may offer me very, very valuable things, I do not like to accept them. I actually accept only things offered to me in devotion and love. If my pure devotee, however, offers me even the most insignificant things, a little flour, a little piece of a leaf, a little water, but saturates the offering in devotional love, then not only do I gladly accept such an offering, but I eat it with great, great pleasure." Lord Krishna assured Sudama Vipra that he would be very glad to accept the chipped rice he had brought from home. Yet out of great shyness, Sudama Vipra hesitated to present it to the Lord. He was thinking, "How can I offer such an insignificant thing to Krishna?" He simply bowed his head. Lord Krishna assured Sudama Vipra that he would be very glad to accept the chipped rice he had brought from home. Lord Krishna, the Super Soul, knows everything in everyone's heart. He knows everyone's determination. He knows everyone's want. He knew, therefore, the reason for Sudama Vipra's coming to him. He knew that, driven by extreme poverty, he had come there by the request of his wife. Thinking of Sudama as his very dear class friend, he knew that Sudama's love for him as a friend was never tainted by any desire for material benefit. Krishna thought, "Sudama has not come asking me for anything. Being obliged by the request of his wife, he has come to see me just to please her." Lord Krishna therefore decided that he would give more material opulence to Sudama Vipra than could be imagined even by the King of Heaven. He then snatched the bundle of chipped rice, which was hanging on the shoulder of the poor Brahmana, packed in one corner of his wrapper, and he said, "What is this?" "My dear friend, you have brought me nice, palatable chipped rice." He encouraged Sudama Vipra, saying, "I consider this quality of chipped rice will satisfy not only me, but the whole creation." It is understood from this statement that Krishna, being the original source of everything, is the root of the entire creation. As watering of the root of the tree immediately distributes water to every part of the tree, so an offering made to Krishna, or any action done for Krishna, is to be considered the highest welfare work for everyone, because the benefit of such an offering is distributed throughout the creation. Love for Krishna is distributed to all living entities. While Lord Krishna was speaking to Sudama Vipra, he ate one morsel of chipped rice from his bundle, and when he attempted to eat the second morsel, Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune herself, checked the Lord by catching hold of his hand. After touching the hand of Krishna, Rukmini said, "My dear Lord, this one morsel of chipped rice is sufficient to cause him who offered it to become very opulent in this life and continue opulence into the next life. My dear Lord, you are so kind to your devotee that even one morsel of this chipped rice pleases you very greatly, and your pleasure assures the devotee opulence in this life and the next. This indicates that when food is offered to Lord Krishna with love and devotion, and he is pleased and accepts it from his devotee, Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, becomes so greatly obliged to the devotee that she has to go personally to the devotee's home to turn it into the most opulent home in the world. If one feeds Narayana sumptuously, the goddess Fortune Lakshmi automatically becomes a guest in one's home, which means that one's home becomes opulent. The learned Brahmana Sudama passed the night at the house of Lord Krishna, and while he was there, he felt as if he were living in the Vaikuntha planet. Actually, he was living in Vaikuntha, because wherever Lord Krishna is, the original Narayana, and Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, live, is not different from the spiritual planets of Vaikuntha Loka. The learned Brahmana Sudama did not appear to have received anything substantial from Lord Krishna while at his palace, yet he did not ask anything of the Lord. The next morning he started for his home, always thinking about his reception by Krishna, and thus he merged in transcendental bliss. All the way home he simply remembered the dealings of Lord Krishna, and he felt very happy to have seen the Lord. The Brahmana thought, it is most pleasurable to see Lord Krishna, who is the most devoted to the Brahmanas. How great a lover he is of the Brahminical culture. He is the supreme Brahman himself, yet he reciprocates with the Brahmanas. He also respects the Brahmanas so much that he embraced to his chest such a poor Brahmana as me, although he never embraces anyone to his chest except the goddess of fortune. How can there be any comparison between me, a poor sinful Brahmana, and the supreme Lord Krishna, who is the only shelter of the goddess of fortune? And yet, considering me a Brahmana with heartfelt pleasure, he embraced me with his two transcendental arms. Lord Krishna was so kind to me that he allowed me to sit on the same bedstead where the goddess of fortune lies down. He considered me his real brother. How can I appreciate my obligation to him? When I was tired, Srimati Rukmini Devi, the goddess of fortune, began to fan me, holding the chamra whisk in her own hand, and she never considered her exalted position as the first queen of Lord Krishna. I was rendered service by the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of his high regard for the Brahmanas, and by massaging my legs and feeding me with his own hand, he practically worshipped me. Aspiring for the elevation to heavenly planets, liberation, all kinds of material opulence, our perfection in the powers of mystic yoga, everyone throughout the whole universe worships the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Yet the Lord was so kind to me that he did not give me even a farthing, knowing very well that I am a poverty-stricken man, who, if I got some money, might become puffed up and mad at the material opulence, and so forget them. The statement of the Brahmana Sudama is correct. An ordinary man who is very poor prays to the Lord for benediction in material opulence, who somehow or other becomes rich in material opulence, immediately forgets his obligation to the Lord. Therefore, the Lord does not offer opulences to his devotee, unless the devotee is thoroughly tested. Rather, if a neophyte devotee serves the Lord very sincerely, and at the same time wants material opulence, the Lord keeps him from obtaining it. Thinking in this way, the learned Brahmana gradually reached his own home. But there he saw everything was wonderfully changed. He saw that in place of his cottage, there were big palaces made of valuable stones and jewels, glittering like the sun and the moon and rays of fire. Not only were there big palaces, but at intervals there were beautifully decorated parks, in which many beautiful men and women were strolling. In those parks there were nice lakes full of lotus flowers, and beautiful lilies, and there were flocks of multicolored birds. Seeing the wonderful conversion of his native place, the Brahmana began to think to himself, how am I seeing all these changes? Does this place belong to me, or to someone else? If it is the same place where I used to live, then how has it become so wonderfully changed? While the learned Brahmana was considering this, a group of beautiful men and women, with features resembling those of the demigods, accompanied by musical chanters, approached him to welcome him. All were singing auspicious songs. The wife of the Brahmana was very glad upon hearing the tidings of her husband's arrival, and with great haste she came out of the palace. The Brahmana's wife appeared so beautiful that it seemed as if the goddess of fortune herself had come to receive him. As soon as she saw her husband present before her, tears of joy fell from her eyes, and her voice became so choked up that she could not even address her husband. She simply closed her eyes in ecstasy. With great love and affection, she bowed before her husband, and within herself she thought of embracing him. She was fully decorated with a gold necklace and ornaments, and while standing among the maid servants, she appeared like a demigod's wife, just alighting from an airplane. The The Brahmana was surprised to see his wife so beautiful, and in great affection, without saying a word, he entered the palace with her. When the Brahmana entered his personal apartment in the palace, he saw that it was not an apartment, but the residence of the King of Heaven. The palace was surrounded by many columns of jewels. The couches and bedsteads were made of ivory and bedecked with gold jewels. The bedding was as white as the foam of milk, and as soft as a lotus. There were many wreaths hanging from golden rods, and many golden thrones, with sitting cushions as soft as lotus flowers. In various places there were velvet and silken canopies, with laces of pearls hanging all around. The structure of the building stood on excellent transparent marble, and engravings made of emerald stones. All the women in the palace carried lamps made of valuable jewels. The flames and the jewels combined to produce a wonderfully brilliant light. When the Brahmana saw his position suddenly change to one of opulence, and when he could not determine the cause for such a sudden change, he began to consider very gravely how it had all happened. He thus began to think, from the beginning of my life, I have been extremely poverty-stricken. So what could have caused such a great and sudden opulence? I do not find any other cause than the all-merciful glance of my friend, Lord Krishna, the chief of the Yadu dynasty. Certainly these are gifts of Lord Krishna's causeless mercy. The Lord is self-sufficient, the husband and goddess of fortune, and thus he is always full with six opulences. He can understand the mind of his devotees, and he sumptuously fills the devotees' desires. All these acts are of my friend Lord Krishna. My beautiful dark friend Krishna is more liberal than the cloud, which can give the great ocean water. Without disturbing the cultivator with rain during the day, the clouds bring little rain at night just to satisfy him. And yet when the cultivator wakes up in the morning, he thinks that it has not rained enough. Similarly, the Lord fulfills the desires of everyone according to his position. Yet one who is not in Krishna consciousness considers all the gifts of the Lord to be less than his desire. On the other hand, when the Lord receives a little thing in love and affection from his devotee, he considers it a great and valuable gift. I am a vivid example of this. I simply offered him a morsel of chipped rice. In exchange, he has given me the opulences greater than those who have given him. When the devotee actually offers the Lord, is not needed by the Lord, for he is self-sufficient. If the devotee offers something to the Lord, it acts for his own interest, because whatever a devotee offers the Lord comes back in quantity 1,000,000 times greater than what was offered. He does not become a loser by giving to the Lord. He becomes a gainer by millions of times. The Brahmana, feeling great obligation to Lord Krishna, thought, I pray to have the friendship of Lord Krishna, to engage in his service, and to surrender fully unto him in love and affection, life after life. I do not want any opulence. I only desire not to forget his service. I simply wish to be associated with his pure devotees. May my mind and activities always be engaged in his service. The unborn Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, knows that many great personalities have fallen from their positions because of extravagant opulence. Therefore, when his devotee asks for some opulence from him, the Lord sometimes does not give it. He is very cautious with his devotees. Because a devotee is in the immature position of devotional service, if offered great opulence may fall from his position due to being in the material world, the Lord does not offer him opulence. This is another manifestation of the causeless mercy of the Lord upon his devotees. His first interest is that devotee not fall. He is exactly like a well-wishing father who does not give much wealth into the hand of an immature son, but who, when the son is grown up and knows how to spend money, gives him the whole treasury house. The learned Brahmana thus concluded that whatever opulence he had received from the Lord should not be used for his extravagant sense of gratification, but for the service of the Lord. The Brahmana accepted his newly acquired opulence, but he did so in a spirit of renunciation, remaining unattached to sense gratification, and thus he lived very peacefully with his wife, enjoying all the facilities of opulence as the prasadam of the Lord. He enjoyed varieties of food by offering it to the Lord and then taking it as prasadam. Similarly, if by the grace of the Lord we get such opulences as material wealth, fame, power, education, and beauty, it is our duty to consider that all are gifts of the Lord and must be used for his service, not for our sense enjoyment. The learned Brahmana remained in that position, and thus his love and affection for Lord Krishna increased day by day. It did not deteriorate due to great opulence. Material opulence can be the cause of degradation and also the cause of elevation, according to the purposes for which it is used. If opulence is used for sense gratification, it is the cause of degradation, and if it is used for the service of the Lord, it is the cause of elevation. It is evident from Lord Krishna's dealings with Sudama Vipra that the Supreme Person of Godhead is very, very much pleased with a person who possesses formidable qualities. A qualified Brahmana like Sudama Vipra is naturally a devotee of Lord Krishna. Therefore, it is said, Brahmano Vaishnava. A Brahmana is a Vaishnava. Or sometimes it is said, Brahmana Pandita. Pandita means a highly learned person. A Brahmana cannot be foolish or uneducated. Therefore, there are two divisions of Brahmanas, namely the Vaishnavas and the Panditas. Those who are simply learned are Panditas, but not yet devotees of the Lord are Vaishnavas. Lord Krishna is not especially pleased with them. Simply the qualification of a learned Brahmana is not sufficient to attract the Supreme Personality of God. Not only must a Brahmana be well qualified according to the requirements stated in the scriptures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Srimad Bhagavatam, but at the same time he must be a devotee of Lord Krishna. The vivid example is Sudama Vipra. He was a qualified Brahmana, unattached to all sorts of material sense enjoyment. At the same time, he was a great devotee of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna, the enjoyer of all sacrifices and penances, is very fond of a Brahmana like Sudama Vipra. And we have seen by the actual behavior of Lord Krishna how much he adores a Brahmana. Therefore, the ideal stage of human perfection is to become a Brahmana, a Vaishnava, like Sudama Vipra. Sudama Vipra realized that although Lord Krishna is incomparable, he nevertheless agrees to be conquered by his devotees. He realized how kind Lord Krishna was to him, and he was always in trance, constantly thinking of Krishna. By constant association with Lord Krishna, whatever darkness of material contamination remained within his heart was completely cleared away, and very shortly after, he was transferred to the spiritual kingdom, which is the goal of all saintly persons in the perfectional stage of life. Sukadeva Goswami has stated that all persons who hear this narration, the history of Sudama Vipra and Lord Krishna, will know how affectionate Lord Krishna is to Brahmanas, to devotees like Sudama. And therefore anyone who hears this narration gradually becomes qualified as Sudama Vipra. And he is thus transferred to the spiritual kingdom of Lord Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. I always thought that was a sweet story.
It's interesting to hear how Krishna is bewildered when they're lost. You know, like he doesn't know where they are. He's super self. It's really beautiful story. And that's nice. Thank you.
Yes,
Things come to my mind. First thing, you see how the Supreme Lord, even though he didn't have to be a disciple of Sundari, but to show the example how that person, whatever great thing do, come and follow in his footsteps. You see how the Lord Shri Krishna took that position as a
we always have higher authority. We always have to be
and how he would, in one day, Sundari would show him how to do something. I remember, maybe you can correct me, how one day he would perfect it, how by doing certain things, whether it was learning how to dress, hair, or put on jewelry, or make jewels, or do different things with instruments and anything like that.